Welcome back, everyone! You did not see a 2-minute stream between this and the previous stream. The first part of this mapping it out should be in our backdrop, and if you're watching it on YouTube, then you should be able to find that fairly quickly as well. So, due to our failing to resolve a specific problem, I have no opponents right now. It's terrible. So I'm taking a run out to where I expect to find something. Not necessarily the people I'm looking for, but something of use to me at least. And I won't necessarily be trying to get everyone into the same session in the same way as usual today. I might try something toward the end of stream if it all fails entirely. But this is back to having minor issues with their server system and geographical area. You can think of it much like there being a battle lounge happening, but you can't always be sure who is in the lounge and not. So effectively there is a lounge of 3 that I have left the rest of the team in, and due to the high traffic in this area, if you want to start off playing this game, definitely you should be in this area. And there's Omni losing health by jumping off of wherever. But that means I have an opponent. An opponent at mild disadvantage, but still. You should have been watching the end of the previous stream to get some information to understanding of what's happening here. I should have just gone for the sidestep after all. I went for the bat dash. It was too long to bat dash out of. Building your deck in this game, building up your character's fighting style, is entirely up to you, but this also means that it's quite hard. If you've ever found yourself thinking, I don't fully understand how people choose characters in fighting games, you should probably play this game if it's cheap just to understand how that decision is made, because you get the choice of every decision can be made by you precisely. It's never, the developers said I needed this move. Sure, the move list in the game is limited, but it's like a limit of 160 or something. And since you can do at least some of those moves from each stance, you've got at least 40 moves, I'd say, per stance to think through. I feel like it's more than that because you can put front left moves, there's front left moves and front right moves, and they don't actually have anything to do with each other in that way. Curly Jedi has been around. Hopefully they will not interrupt without asking. Ag! Out of spacing. That sort of thing happens to me because my friends know really well. Yeah, she's just gonna keep on attacking, so it's not as if this is actually a huge disadvantage to me. It's almost entirely that if I am out of position, as with most fighting games, if my spacing is bad, it's really easy to punish me. Ah, I went for the wrong move there. Alright then, let's go one more time. With no high-low mix-up in the game truly, you do not have to worry as much. If you're blocking, you're blocking. And this would seem as if it has a big deal to it, but you can't just block forever. So you explicitly, because you can't block forever, must deal with the fact that even if someone is going for lows, the main benefit they're getting by going for lows is kind of backward compared to other games. They're usually breaking their character so low that they're not going to get hurt. So, time for a switch. Assuming she's ready. Here we are. One thing that you are not seeing, or rather that I haven't explained but you're seeing far too much, is the feint option here. While the game's choices and moves are relatively simplistic, and you might argue that your opponent can always know what you're going to do if they can recognize your stance, not only is recognizing your stance very hard, you also have the option to change your stance, but at least in limited ways. This stance changing happens by pressing the block button while an attack is animating, at pretty much any point of it as well. This will cause your character to flash that black thing you see there. And that alone will cause the stance to change. Because while your character did not finish the move, the designers made it so that you will change to the stance that you would have done anyway. You can use this to fake out your opponent, but of course it does have a time requirement. There is a moment where you cannot be doing anything as a result of this. Choosing when to feint and when to follow through on the attack that you're using is probably the hardest part of this. Even with a fully developed deck, it's possible that there are ways you need to do your feints and your moves specifically that will change and control a lot of your fighting style. As you know if you've ever watched our other content, this player and I are heavy on the footsies. So there's a lot that happens in those small moments of, did I continue this attack or not? I think that means I won. Which means I must call upon the rabbit once again. Feinting, of course, is also a good way to make your opponent react to things that aren't necessarily real threats. And this can cause changes in their behavior in ways that help you. Here I am fighting at no meter, rather stamina meter. But it's often good to be relentless in that position anyway, because your opponent is there thinking to themselves, you can't do more to me now. And you could just go, no, I refuse to believe that. Nearly got killed. And very much did get killed. Perfectly spaced sweep. The purple effect you are seeing is basically that you also get to choose your, let's call it a special move. Metered option, that's the word I was looking for. In my case, my metered options, you've seen some used normally before, but I have a different one. There is this, the shockwave, which pushes your opponent back and does very minimal damage. That gravity, which I now am slower for, as long as you see that red icon, which isn't very long, but you normally do it in combos. And the purple one, which is the most important to my current style, which prevents your opponent's stamina from regenerating for about the same amount of time. That sweep again. If you're a very pressure-heavy character who runs out of your own energy quickly, because it does take energy to attack as well as defend, as you've seen, you might want that option just to keep your opponents from regenerating while yours does. It also acts as a valid guard break in a lot of situations. I'm going to count that as 2-2 because I was talking too much and once again lost track. So this is the decider, I guess. More powerful moves, particularly ones with very long startup, tend to lead to your opponent losing more stamina very quickly. But since I am losing track a little bit, I'm going to let these two fight as usual. And then loser of that will probably try to move around so we can see what changes in terms of who has access to this lounge instance, whatever you want to call it. If you want to form lounges in this game, it's usually easier to do so by using this area, simply because a lot of people pass through here for some reason that I'm not actually all that sure of. I think the game sort of points you in this direction at the beginning. But I also feel like I forgot why that is, because I don't think the first marked one, being the characters that you have to fight in order to get metered options, I'm not sure the one here is the first one. Yet somehow, people tend to end up here probably because they were going left, and they chose to continue going left from the guidance bridge. There's 1-0 to Omni for now. And this area is also a much better place to get most footage for fighting, particularly because of the ranges people end up at, though these two are managing to get themselves off screen, at least momentarily. With punish heavy. As I mentioned before, you can put any moves you want in spaces. It is usually easier to put your heavy attacks, you could call them, in that space where they don't combo into things, because if you needed to quickly do more attacks, well, at least it certainly makes sense to do it the other way. If you have very heavy attacks, you are basically free, but if you have very light attacks, you don't necessarily want them in that space, as it makes the execution slightly harder. This is because the move will generally end in the same stance once it's completed regardless. So unless you wanted, for example, the option to go into 2 different attacks quickly from a light attack, which is a valid way to make a character, you wouldn't necessarily need it. But if you did so, you could put a lighter attack on the "this isn't going to combo" style space. And depending on how exactly that move worked, you would have the same amount of options anyway, without having to worry about possibly continuing a combo that you didn't really want to or mean to. None of this is specifically the sort of thing that you care about the other way, though, so I'm going to stop talking about that as a whole for now, and see what happens if Rune Siren runs off to unload from the session for now. And I guess, since Zombie Rabbit won, we will face off once again. Healing is in fact a metered option. It does happen over time though, so you don't necessarily want to count on it the same way. A lot of spacing stuff is happening here. And I think it is actually fairly visible that it's happening. I'm thankful for that because this game would be very hard to understand if it wasn't. Metered options will generally give you some amount of armor while you're activating them, so you can use them as invincibility, as you'd expect. Some of them are actual armor, which matters a lot more. Gravitied. Unfortunately, I couldn't keep that going long enough because I had lost my own stamina. But it pays off to be relentless, or it paid off for a moment because my opponent continued to think, oh well, she's not going to stop attacking just because she doesn't have any stamina. All the same sorts of things you see in 2D and 3D fighting games that do not fit this model, let's say. And our original opponent is back. Oof. Oof again. I'm being red all over the place today. Your backdash is also a way to dodge moves outright, but tends to take more stamina than a lot of other things. In order to unlock moves, you must fight for quite a while against people who use them. Even basic moves sometimes will have this problem because when you start the game, you are given a character with a specific style. Should have gone for the second hit of that. And I'm just going to surrender on that one. I feel like I've already lost 3 times, and therefore I have already lost 3 times in my own mind. Is this my good spot? I think this is my good spot. You can see from further away this way, though they may drift in this direction, so be aware. Here's perfect. This way I can change just the camera angle slightly. You do have options related to using other weapons, though it doesn't come up too often in our fights because it costs meter to summon your weapon. You can give the meter back, sort of, by unsummoning the weapon, but this is a move with an animation, and therefore it costs the same amount of time in a fight. I think you get the weapon out all of the time anyway, but you definitely pay in terms of health for the problem. Just as with stance characters in other games, when you change to your weapon, you can have an entirely different fighting style, assuming you had enough moves for it. You can have a very slightly different fighting style as well. No one knew what to do in that interaction, so double backdash, completely synchronized, was probably the only thing that was going to happen regardless. There go the gloves. And, as you'd expect, you have to pick them up. As you can see, the game does use a relatively intuitive but sometimes hard to activate lock-on system. I could lock on to either of these players and it would help me follow their match, but it also changes the camera around sometimes in ways that might be dizzying depending on how close they are, so I don't always do it. In this spot, it might not be so bad to actually activate it though. They've had a lot of time to balance this game. Not fully balance, because there is some truth to the fact that eventually everyone understands that there is a meta that works the best. But that wasn't really ever something that they were trying to fight against. If it was anything, it was more so giving you the freedom to deviate from that meta very slightly in some way that suits you, or come up with your own methodology that works for you and possibly just you. I think that's 2-2 now, but I'm not necessarily fighting again before the end of stream anyway. Oof, relentless. Alright, I'll go for it. We started with this fight. We will close up with this fight. Despite the fact that this stream is shorter, or rather, you will probably be seeing it that way if you're looking on YouTube or in our old streams situation, that's only because there was a part 1, as the title suggests, and it isn't set up perfectly the first time. If you're interested in how decks are built, other concepts like that, you can probably find it on previous streams of the same content if you're really interested. Although I can't tell you there was a specific point. It usually happens 20 to 30 minutes into the stream when I have time to give that explanation after giving all of the other explanations. With this game's lower popularity, you generally shouldn't assume that I will spend as much time assuming that the people watching it know what they're looking at. And today, with my more intense opponent style, it's harder to spend as much time talking about the same things. No Someone's actually managed to ring out today. Should have gone for the light again. Note again, when I say light, I'm not talking about a thing related to buttons precisely. Nothing that you, as the player, are locked into. I call them lights because they're the quickest attack. They're my light attacks, so they get called that. And that was probably a terrible idea. But managed, barely. With Hunterfist using her meter to activate basically a couple seconds of super armor to go through anything I did. But punched in the face. Alright, we'll have one more, and this time we're trying to knock each other into the water, so that's where the stream will end. My opponent has made the incorrect decision of moving closer to the water, probably because of the lock-on thing again. I had the other feint this time. Oh well. No one going into the drink today. But we have come to the end of our stream and the end of our combat. If you like this game but don't necessarily think it's for you, you can also look into their other new game, Sifu. And in this case, we'll be headed toward Guidance Bridge to end the stream fully there. For our other game content, you can always check on our Twitter, 2_MK_FGC. She just jumped into the water to get here faster, didn't she? Our Twitter will tell you whether or not we are streaming on any given day. And sometimes we miss it altogether, but if you don't see a tweet, usually by 7:30 Central Eastern Time for the Central European Time for our EU streams, or Eastern Time for our NA streams, then you can usually assume that we're not streaming if it's not up by like 7:40. You can find all of our bots for other games and other content at our website 2-mk.org. And you can join us for the rest of the week for our Monday Mishmashing Battle Lounge in Street Fighter V, Melty Blood on Tuesday with the Tuesday Melt and Wednesday Night in Birth, and of course Feeling Thursday, our King of Fighters content. But it is the end of our Absolution for the day. This has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.